a chance to look at that, and a motion to approve that would be appropriate.
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Helms, second by Mr. Yurcheck. Thank you both. Also, you have the occasion to receive the minutes from our January the 8th meeting, and hopefully have a chance to review that. The motion to approve the minutes from our last gathering. Mrs. Scholl has made the motion. Second. I didn't see a second. And Ms. Morrison hands. Okay. Thank you both. This time we'll turn the meeting over to Dr. Webb, and we're excited to hear what he has to say about the CCEP.
Okay, thank you. We would like to thank this group for the opportunity to do the presentation on our community construction equity plan, and we will be glad to entertain questions, and if there's something in there, if you want to stop us and ask the questions. This has been presented to our Board of Education, and the board has approved it, and the board's work of education's work is now finished, and that they have forgot, well, we have not formally given it to Ms. Codo in the format they want for year one, and we're working on that, Ms. Codo, but you know what's coming at you based on the plan. And so our Board of Education has worked diligently, and staff has worked diligently to provide this to the board. They've approved it, and now it comes to the working group and to the county commissioners for your pleasure. And so, Mike, hit it.
Well, I will try to make this as brief and as thorough as I possibly can. Again, it's the CCEP. At our last meeting, I shared with you kind of the process that we went through to get to this final product. And for those watching, and as a reflection back, what we did, we asked the site-based teams to come together in each one of our schools. Site-based team consists of parents, teachers, administrators. Could be anyone from out in the community at which the principal had pulled and placed together on that team. And they put their wants and needs together. And I will say there was some wants and there was some needs. When we started, the list was then compiled and went to the facilities committee. When they started with it, there were 1,760 some projects listed. The facilities committee began to screen those projects down and to try to get to the needs. That filtering process moved it from about 1,760 plus projects down to approximately 850 projects. So there was a vetting process, and they did this according to a point scale. Remember me sharing with you that each one of the members would receive a maximum of 3 votes, and therefore the highest rated projects would be those carrying 12 points of the 4 board members that were representing the facilities committee. As you can see, this is what it starts with. Again, we started with the school. This is Antioch. It's in alphabetical order, but it is prioritized by the year. So if the principal goes in to look and share with their community, and all this is on the facilities webpage, they go there, they can look in year 1 for Antioch. They can see that it is a life safety item. It's dealing with the upgrade of their IP camera platform. That's our estimated cost. I shared with the board, and I'd like to share with this committee. These are soft costs. Until we go out to bid with them, we're going to probably be close. We'll be high on some, low on the others, but when it all works out in the end, we should be very close. The facilities recommended that project, and it received a total of 12 points or votes, and therefore it was placed in year 1. We looked in year 1 for life safety, and we looked at structural. If you mine down, and I've given you a list there, you will see out of the approximately $20 million requested, $10.4 million of that is for roofs. Again, 10.4. If you look at what we put into roofs to now, and with this 10.4, within a short amount of window or time, we'll put almost $30 million in roofs. The exact figure is right at 29.4. So again, you can see, and it's year 1, year 2, year 3. There's 8 years. Mr. Yates and I met, along with Mr. Karpinski, and we discussed this. We talked about how the plan came together, how we could potentially look at what we talked about, eating the elephant over a period of years. We took the $20 million that had been recommended per documents provided by Mr. Yates, and we carved that up over 8 years. So it's $20 million a year per 8 year, gets every project that scored from a 1 to a 12 that had been filtered from wants down to needs on the list. So year 8 contains those projects that were lower on the rubric. Again, you can scroll down. I don't want to waste your time with that, but that's how it's put together.
But Mike, I want to clarify for this group, the 20 million times 8 years won't get every one of the projects.
It gets every one of the projects that fall within, I'll use Jeff's term, the pay-go category. The brick and mortar pieces will fall into a different, there's 3 documents that I'm going to share with you today. One of them is this, the 8-year plan, 20 million a year, and then the calendar for the projects. And then what does those projects entail? What are they? Because that's what the folks, the stakeholders at the schools, they want to know what's going to be done in that year to 2 years.
But for clarity's sake, I want everyone to understand the pay-go at 20 million times 8 years will not take care of all the needs.
So if you want to, again, at your time, you can look through and see how they were scored. What I want to highlight is this area here in yellow. We are working with Mr. Yates and Ms. Kodo. It's probably already on your agenda, commissioners. We had some savings in that emergency roofing funds that you had provided us. And what we would like to do, this area here in yellow is $543.6 thousand. We would like to go ahead and do that project with the savings, that Benton Heights project. And so we're working, we've shared that documentation information with Mr. Yates, and I'm sure it will work its way to your all's agenda.
It should be on the April 6th agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. So, and then, again, that project will come off that list.
Can I ask you a question, Dr. Webb?
Mm-hmm.
Back to what Dr. Ellis was saying. The 8-year plan that you have, maintenance, what we refer to as the maintenance plan, down going pay-go portion, is there, when you say it doesn't meet your needs, are you saying that you're talking about the things that fell off the bottom of the list?
No.
Help me understand.
Okay, let me try to explain. Mike, you can jump in here. The pay-go will not take care of the brick and mortar needs.
Okay, so you're saying, except the other list.
That's correct.
That's not inclusive of the other list. Okay,
That's
I
correct.
just want to be clear that I understood, because I wanted to be sure it wasn't, that this doesn't address the ongoing maintenance stuff.
No, when you look at all 3, the list complement one another, means they work together.
So in conjunction, though, they do meet the needs.
That's correct.
And the Board of Education approved their needs. What you've got in the different pots are the needs that the Board of Education identified.
Let's break that $20 million down before I go further, okay? When we think of capital, and I'm not dealing with current expense, I'm only dealing with the capital side. When we set an even number there for us to work with at $20 million, we carved out $1 million for transportation and technology to be utilized. So that took you down to $19 million, okay? In year 1, it was recommended, it was recommended by the roofing consultant that you should put at least $3 million per year in roofing. I did not reflect that in year 1 because we're putting $10.4 million in roofing, okay? But for years 2 through 8, you will back out $1 million per year for technology, so it takes you to 19. Then you would back out the $3 million for the roofing, that takes you to 16. And then what we had talked about was what we call preventative maintenance, is a 10% of that $20 million or $2 million that could be used for preventative maintenance, chiller goes bad, etc., to replace it. So when you back that down, that left you with about $14 million that you would address issues in years 2 through 8. When you look at year 1, we back the $1 million out to 19. We back the $2 million out of that 10%. So that takes you to 17. And we did pull the roofing out again, as I shared with you, the 10.4 was already reflected in that. So that left us right at $17 million. And as you scroll down to the bottom of each one of those pages, those numbers should go to that. I have left a little room because I said the numbers are soft. So if it says it's $16,334,000 at the bottom of the first page, it's because the dollar figures you see there were pulled from CFS as done in 2009. You know the cost in 2014 is not going to, or 2015 is not going to reflect that.
We don't have the totals at the bottom of pages.
The total should be then on the, but you know it's going to total up to $20 million.
So what we're saying is everything that has a 1 over in the far right-hand column, which is year 1.
That's year one.
Where those ones stop.
That's the end of that.
That's the end of year 1, and that's what you're saying is
That's
about
correct.
17 million.
That's correct.
And then year 2, it's what, 14 million?
14 million.
Because you're backing out the 3 for roofs.
Backing out the 3 for roofs, the 2 for preventative maintenance, and the 1 for transportation and technology.
Reverse that.
No,
That's right.
Now, what happens if we really miss the numbers and we just go right down the list? Well, and it's not, you're not continuing to fill the bucket at the end, halfway through. We run through and there's still 3 projects left on year 1. They are pushed to the next year and they are the first projects completed in that year 2. Okay?
Well, and other things I would imagine would change because as you have emerging needs, if a portion of a roof is supposed to be done, but then there's a bigger issue in the roof and that brings that school further up. Things are gonna be in flux.
That's correct.
Because
The plan has to be
things are-
agile.
yeah, okay.
I mean, it's gotta be nimble to move.
Question, please.
Yes, sir.
The $2 million, you talked about chillers, but does that include the painting and regular maintenance?
You can't use painting, you can't use that as a
I'm
capital.
talking about, well, I understand, I'm talking about the traditional maintenance.
That's right. Asbestos, you get into a project, you gotta remove asbestos. That comes out of
Does
that
that
too.
fall under your operating budget to,
The asbestos.
not asbestos, but, you gotta continually paint and take care of the schools, where's that?
That's a current expense, Donald, that's,
Current level, current expense.
Okay, all right.
I think
So, and that's
You
out
said
of the,
PM, that's
what,
right.
87 million?
that would have to be
That's
out
operating. Out of the
of
operating?
the operating side. Painting is not capitalizable.
Okay, so, I'm confused, but that's not hard to do. 17 million in year 1
Correct.
is comprised of what?
All those projects you see with, it says year 1 right there. On your list.
The right-hand
See,
side.
you're
is
right,
the
right,
roof.
Right, I got that, and,
10.4, that 17 is roofs.
okay, so that 10.4 is included in those numbers?
That's correct.
Okay, and then, all right, and then the transportation and preventive maintenance is included in that?
It's included in the 20. Remember, I started from the 20,
Start from the 20, you take
back out
out.
$1 million for buses and technology, back out $2 million for the preventative maintenance,
Right.
and left you the 17.
Right.
Now back out 10.4 of those projects, and they're listed in there for roofing.
Okay. So that leaves you another 3, well, 7, 6.66.
6.6.
6.6.
Okay?
And is that why you see a lot of the life safety and security up in year 1? Because you backed out roofing and all those other kind of things, and so you're putting.
The
a lot of
roofing's
that-
in there. Life safety and structural were the first 2 things that were the number 1 priorities that we put in there. And then what we tried to do was group the projects so we could bulk purchase,
Okay.
so that we can save more dollars.
Dr. Webb, before, I'm sorry,
Yes, Ms.
before you
Scott.
go on to the next one, under life safety, and I see it in year 1, and I think I also I saw some in year 2, on the upgrade to the IP camera platform, could you just give me a little bit as to why is that under life safety?
What is it?
Yeah.
As you look at your platform, we have 48 cameras, and correct me if I'm wrong, 48 at the high schools, 36 at the middle, and 16 at our elementary schools. So as those are age out, we have to make sure that those DVRs still work, our cameras are working. But that's really the platform, it's that quarterback that brings all that information in.
And
So does this plan, I'm sorry.
In case of emergency, the sheriff can tunnel into that.
Right.
And so, we try to keep that up to date so they can tunnel into it. That's the way we solve a lot of issues.
So I'm making the assumption based upon what I've seen that through this 8-year plan, you are probably replacing cameras in most of the schools? No?
We have another first year.
Okay.
If the, correct, not always just a camera, but
Right.
the
The infrastructure.
controller, I guess, is the easiest way, rather than the
Okay.
infrastructure.
Well, it's kind of parallel to fire alarm systems. We have one school, for instance, that has a new section, an old section. We have 2 control panels, 2 sets of enunciators, and as part of this plan, the revision will be to consolidate into one cabinet with modern technology to provide one enunciator panel for the fire department if they show up, one panel that will report to, the 911 center or whatever, and plus, from an operational and maintenance standpoint, we've taken 2 systems that may cause troubles, consolidated into one, so we only have one exposure as far as our O&M costs there. So the cameras kind of parallel that on the life safety issues. It's the technology that we use to monitor and keep the building
That's
safe.
correct.
And I believe some of the systems are so old, we're having trouble finding replacement parts for them.
That's correct, and again, we have to keep that up because of the safety, so that the sheriff's SRT teams can go in, they can remote in, see the site before they ever arrive on the campus, so.
So to be
Well, I
clear, all
think-
schools have this?
That is correct.
Okay, and I think that's why I was asking the question, because if you look at year one, there are fewer projects, well, I don't know if fewer projects, but if you back that roof portion out, so all of this is stuff that's still going on, but we're just putting the safety and security up front as a #1 priority. So the roofs are taken care of, but then we're going on to the safety and security. Does that make sense?
That's correct. You protect the structural from the outside, protect the children at the inside, and now the years 3 and on, you start looking at the inside pieces, what you have to try to fix.
Now, going back to the camera and security question, some of the newer schools, do they have a system in it already, and you're just making it level across the board, consolidating, have like systems?
That's
Or
correct.
is this a replacement of all systems in the schools?
No, that's it. Again, we've had systems in for years.
Yeah, I'm sure there's
And
some
so
that
it's-
are quite.
Think of it as
bad.
it's like a uniform rotation basis. We've got a plan to replace those
So
over a period of time.
you're bringing everything up to the same
That's correct.
base level.
Hence the word equity, or E, in the CCEP, right?
Well, and you also have to think, as you add, if you add additions to the facilities, you have to have a platform that can expand, because those 48 cameras now and 36 fit the blueprint that you have. So if you've maxed out on that platform and you need to add 6 more cameras because you added 12 classrooms, exterior, the hallways, whatever you're trying to cover, the platform may not support that. We put together a construction calendar. This really helps Mr. Yates and his team as they look at, and the county commissioners, as you look at trying to plan on funding. For the stakeholders, the principals, the community members, they really are going to have, they want the information on the next PDF file. What's going to take place in this timeline? That's the actual construction. As Mr. Yates will share with you, it's kind of like pulling off a home equity loan. These are small costs in the red. That's your soft cost. The soft cost number here, this 1.4 and change at Walter Bickett, is included in that cost there. It's not this plus this, okay? So as you're in your planning phase, and this is your permitting and so forth, and now this is your construction. This is where your largest payout is as you move through your construction phase.
Dr. Webb, where are the descriptions of these
That's
projects?
the next one.
All right, before you go there, Mike, explain to them about Walter Bickett, because it's an outlier, and they need to know that, about the funding.
Correct. Walter Bickett, we've already started on that project. We earmarked the funds, capital funds that we had for this year to begin and complete that project. We're in the design phase. We've held a couple of design charrettes already with the administration and the architects and the team at which the administration's put together for that addition. what we talked about, what Mr. Yates and I talked about, was how do we bridge this gap right here? How do we bridge this gap? As you can see, obviously we're not going to get started here in February, so that's going to be pushed some. All right. When you look at Newtown Elementary School A&R down through Porter Ridge High School A&R, that's about $13.3 million to complete those projects. The soft cost is much cheaper than that. But we need to move forward with those projects. How do we, again, we're here to share with you what the needs are. We're telling you that the needs is to get started in these additions and renovations now. I think what your task was, if that's our needs, how do we fund that, or can we fund that?
So, I'm sorry, so can I ask the question, so the costs that are in the red going up through Porter Ridge, those would be costs the soft costs that you would be spending in the next few months?
That's
out
correct.
of existing funds now?
No, there's no funding source for that.
That's what I'm saying, is that I just wanted to understand.
There is no funding source.
One other thing I want to point out, the ATC, Mike, if you'll laser that, we have talked with Dr. Stan Cedar, and the community college and the public schools have had a wonderful partnership for multiple years. Our 23 academies are tied up with the community college, and we have met with Dr. Cedar. He and Dr. Webb and I met yesterday. I met with him one time previously, and you met with the
I met with the facilities board trustees.
The trustees, that they and we, and I hope, we've talked with the facilities chair, but are willing to, instead of them having a facility and us having a facility, I live here, that's two of the same thing. I don't know that we need that, but we have agreed that the community college and the public schools can use the same facility. And I won't call it shift work, but that we can have times, we already have our early college in their building A, that we could see further partnerships and more, because our ATC would not be for freshmen and sophomores. It would be for juniors and seniors going to get the credentialing. And I think that's very important in light of workforce development, because I know somebody said it's a STEM center. No, it's not. It is meeting the needs of our workforce development. We have an advanced manufacturing academy that was born out of the needs of hearing from the economic development saying we can't get X, Y, and Z. So those are that's what we're looking to partner with the workforce, the needs of the workforce development. Mike has worked with his group about looking trending and jobs that are coming, and what you guys, the county commissioners, are wanting to bring to Union County as far as businesses. And so the ATC would be a 11, 12, and then a 13, 14, so to speak, with the community college, targeting the workforce development, what your businesses say they need, and within the academies. Now, Mr. Stewart, do you need to add anything with that?
I think the dual purpose, number one, is wise and being good stewards of the money, but as Chairman Helms and Commissioner Ackman, I think, what is the imbalance now on residential versus industrial commercial? About 90-10, 85-15?
Somewhere a little above 85-15, yeah.
So, you know, no doubt, if we're going to be a player in recruiting industry, especially being adjacent to South Carolina, this is something that could be kind of a centerpiece to train the workforce, both with students coming out from the community college standpoint. So not only does it benefit from an educational standpoint, but I think as far as economic development, this is an excellent opportunity to bring a strong factor into play as far as trying to attract industrial development here.
Dr. Cedar indicated that he would be talking with you, Ms. Cotto, or you, Mr. Yates, I don't know which one, but this has been a fresh conversation about reworking their needs, that we would share the facility.
In their budget submission, they did not identify this at all. And so when we had our work session on Monday, Stan afterwards said, we really need to talk about this. He says, because I did not submit it as part of my budget submission. So we are meeting with him on his budget Friday, and I suspect that's when he will have some discussion with us to clarify, because since he didn't submit it, but it appears that there is some sort of joint partnership, we were very confused as to who was doing
And
what.
I certainly can understand the confusion. Avionics is our newest academy, working with jet engines, and you know, with the regional airport and, like I said, the advanced manufacturing, our fire and safety. And we're open, and I have spoken to the economic development before and said, what do you need? Because if you will tell us, the community college will start working on it, and we'll back up to grades 11 and 12, and that's how we've born 5 or 6 of our latest academies, to try to do our part, and instead of being a tax burden, to be a partner in helping with the jobs.
We have 23 academies, and now those academies, the goal is for them to come out either certified or credentialed, so that, you know, they're able to step into that workforce. The plan is you offer the level 1s and level 2 courses at the schools, and they can move in and out via technology, remain at their own schools. However, they show they have the aptitude, the desire, and the will to finish out in that academy. Then they take those level 3 and 4 classes at the ATC, or Advanced Technical Center. But part of that is they begin to do internships and apprenticeships, so they're getting on-the-job training.
We need to stop doing a commercial for that. We're school people, I'm sorry, to move on.
All right. Again, when you look at the cost for this, when you talk about, this is a large brick and mortar. This is additions and renovations. It's not your gymnasium for equity. We built that in years 4 and 5 in the regular $20 million per year. This will help us as we begin to look at that pocket growth. I don't usually talk much about the bubble growth anymore, because next year the bubble will be in the 9th through the 12th grade. Our high schools, you don't see a lot up there for high schools. Our high schools, due to block scheduling, are able to handle that bubble much better than an elementary or a middle school. Okay? We have to, however, and when you think about in a few years, we're going to be down 6,000 kids. If you do the math, you look at the metrics and analyze it, we'll lose about 6,000 kids. But that's not at the elementary and middle school level. You're going to see those 6,000 kids, they're coming out of your high school, and you're still dealing with the growth. DPI has us growing at about 1.36% next year.
And it's not all over the county, it's pocketed growth, and you know, I think we all know the schools where that is. It's in certain spots, and that's why we're not asking for a new school, because it's not all in one area. We're asking for increments into places to address the pocketed growth only.
And just so, for my clarification, this is based upon the new adoption of school size, the increased school size.
That is correct.
So as you increased school sizes, or caps, or whatever you want to call them, that this is based upon that too.
Correct, and we looked at the data to make sure if a school, if we saw that it was not going to trend growth-wise to 1,600 at a middle school, it was going to reach 1,400 and then begin to decrease after that, then we didn't ask to build the additions to 1,600. You'll see that clearly. It says we're going to build it to 1,400. We need to not, when you look at the growth as it moves through, what you don't want to have is a lot of facilities in 20 years that you don't need. So we ask for where we're seeing the growth. Looking at this data, what we determined, this should get you through about 2025. Folks, that's some stability. And that's what our communities have asked from the Board of Education. Give us some stability.
So Dr. Webb, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So the proposal for this upcoming fiscal year is not 20 million, it's 33.4 million. Is that correct?
For the
with respect
capital.
to these projects.
That's
and
correct.
these projects. Okay.
And that's the 20 million that we were talking about for the 8 years in the pay-go, plus the 13 million to get started on that list.
This will go live tomorrow on the facilities webpage. This will help our parents, et cetera. What's going on? When you say Newtown and we've got that little construction, well, what exactly is going on? They're not going to take the time to go through and look at all the CFS and look at all the documents and try to vet out what it is. So we have put this together for them. So what we're recommending.
We can't see that. I mean, I don't believe anybody can see that, so people need to talk it.
And where are you starting?
Start at the top. You're just using it as a sample, as an example. you know, I'll go through, this is all the brick and mortar that you would add on. That's your last.
We're getting old.
Tell me when you can see it.
I've got my hand, I'm fine. Frank, can you see it now? Barely.
Elementaries have gone from 800 to 1,000.
Elementaries have gone 800 to 1,000, middle schools have gone from 1,200 to 1,600, and high schools have gone from 1,600 to 2,200.
Wait, can you back up? What do you mean they've gone from that?
That they want the seating and the core capacity to match that. So when you hit 1,001, you gotta have a plan.
But that's not what they are
No.
now.
That's what that's correct. They're not built for that now.
Okay.
So
Those numbers began down there, so.
the elementary, the new school size is 1,000, the middle is 1,600, and the high school is 2,200.
And not every school will go to that, not every school will have the need to go to that.
That's correct. And we would not do additions if they did not need that. So, let's just pick one out here as a sample. Let's do Cupperson Middle School there. If you looked at Cupperson Middle School's construction calendar, it says A&R, right? But what does that A&R stand for? It's telling you at Cupperson Middle School, we're gonna do the following thing. We looked at the growth. They're gonna need to go to the 1,600. So for that, that means we're gonna add 12 classrooms. We're gonna add a small satellite media center. We're gonna add 2 teacher workrooms and storage. Now when you think about those 12 classrooms, there's a piece that people don't think about. It's the hallways, it's the restrooms that are part of that as well. So all that is what you have to help when you look at that core space.
And that's formulaic from DPI, or, I mean, there's
recommendations.
a set formula for.
Recommendations.
Okay.
So, and we
Yeah, can you talk more about how you came up with the numbers? How do you know Cuthbertson will go to that? You said pocketed growth, but based on.
we look at the
what?
demographer's report that we have, and we can see the trends there.
Is that
It's online, yes ma'am. That's McKibben's report.
from last year?
Mhm.
And we contract with him every 18 months, and we're getting ready to contract with him again to do an update to see what, if any, changes. So
And
that is an ongoing, that's not a, we're just doing it now, that is.
And I think part of the process this year will be to target pocketed growth areas to get more of a snapshot of those particular areas.
That's correct. We've been macro, looking at the system as a whole. We're going to drill down micro in that crescent area that we've talked about.
Where the
And
growth
so,
is.
and that will help us as well. Again, we want as much information as we possibly can. So you would have to look at your construction calendar, look at Cupperson, see when we would want to start that project, and that's what it would have. If you want to look at East Elementary, the addition is increased to 804 students. That's add 6 classrooms, add 2 teacher workrooms, and storage. These are prioritized on your construction calendar, not in order, but when we would need to start. Okay?
And it's, Mike, it's prioritized by when we see the growth going to be there.
That's correct. So when you look at and you add this up, and I do want to point out, you should have on yours there, as I scroll down here, you will see 3 projects that are highlighted. There'll be Parkwood Middle, Sun Valley Middle, and Piedmont Middle, your 3 middle schools. We continue, again, I shared with you, these are soft numbers. We continue to work with the architects. Don and David continue to scrub this. These 3 projects, due to the complexity of them, we don't believe there's enough money in those projects for that, at that 3.1 and 3.9. The figure on those is that you need to increase by about $2 million per project. And what I'm getting to is this total at the end. If you look at the bottom of that, of your page, or report that I gave you, it's set right around $227 million and some change for those projects. You will need to add $6 million to that. I will correct that on the construction calendar tomorrow morning, so it will be reflected tomorrow morning.
And the 3 middle schools he's talking about are all built on the same floor plan. So maybe we could maximize some of the design, but they are the same 1975 design.
Now, what's driving the 2 million approximate increase across
The
those?
complexity of the projects.
I mean, what's changed from these numbers here to, what's changed from these numbers that you got in here to where you've got to add to? Is there some
It's just the
scope
way that you're gonna,
scope of project or?
correct, by moving your administration on, you may not be able to move it here, you're gonna have to place it in a different location. And again, it just came down to the complexity of it. They said that the dollars in there will not be enough to handle, when you look at, I just use Parkwood Middle, when you're talking about what it needs is the increase to 1,400. Again, we said middle schools could go to 1,600, but the data does not show we need to add the classrooms to 1,600. But to add the 1,400, that means it's adding 15 classrooms there, enlarging the cafeteria, and enlarge the kitchen and administrative offices. That design of that building has some issues because the cafeteria and the offices, when you walk in, you turn left, there's the cafeteria, you turn right, here's the administration. So it's just going to create some issues and timing issues.
Well, and I've worked in all three of those buildings, and I can tell you where the light switches are, I think, just about every light switch and the water cutoffs. And part of it also, the halls are narrow, and when you've got movement that at one corner of the gym going down a hallway, I understand why it's gonna be more complex.
You go to Parkwood, you walk in, here's the left's the cafeteria, the next door takes you into the gymnasium, you make a right into the office.
Yeah.
So the complexity of them, and that's, again,
Monroe.
so I'd rather be transparent instead of, however this group looks at recommending funding, I don't want us to come up and say, wait a minute, we can't do a project because we are $6 million short. The estimate is about $2 million addition to each one of those middle schools.
And that's kind of what I was trying to get at, is we came up with these numbers somehow. I guess the architectural firm,
It's based on the square footage and what we were doing. We used the industry. That's what we based it on, Don, was $185 per square
Well,
foot.
remember, these numbers were from 2008.
Yeah.
So we've had to, they're very old numbers anyway, so we're having to adjust with current.
okay, so these are the H. Graceburg.
That's right. Till you go out to bid, I don't know.
How much confidence do you have in the other numbers then? Because $2 million on a project that's about $4 million.
We felt pretty good with the other numbers. These are the only three we had issues with.
Yeah, that's where I was going with that. Thank you.
But you won't know until you go out to bid you won't know with certainty for anything until you go out to bid.
That's correct.
Well,
But again,
right,
we
but-
felt confident with the numbers that we put in for those.
Well, and talk about your confidence, is that just years and years and years of doing it?
Well, Don speaks to,
Yeah.
About 30 years experience.
Yeah.
as an architect, and we speak to the folks.
Yeah.
We know what the going cost is. I can tell you right now, it's about $185 probably per square foot. When I was meeting with the facilities committee for SPCC, they believe that it's going to go upwards to $225 to $230 the further out that project goes. So the longer you delay on projects, the more it's going to cost you.
Does that make sense, answer your question, Amy?
It does, but I'm looking at the funding issues, because the way this is lining up, we would have to get funding before we get the bids. And so that's my concern.
Well, I think we'll evolve, and when we start talking about potential funding, it's like we talked about PAYGO, we talked about 2/3, we talked about bonds, that sort of thing. That's where we have to rely on Mr. Yates' folks to kind of maybe help plug in to these different scenarios, what might be the best model to fund
So
these
we'll talk
things.
about that.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think Ms. Cotto had said that, so really, year one is not 20, it's 33 or whatever numbers you were using. It's 20, but then it's however if you're gonna fund these buildings or additions separately from the PAYGO and the CCEP, then it becomes a melding of several funding sources, I would imagine. But I'm not the.
Like I said, the staffs that we've been in conversation with that, and again, how do we bridge that gap of those early projects so that we can get started? Again, everything is timed to deal with the trends that we're seeing, and like Dr. Ellis shared with you, McKibben will come on board early this spring. He will begin to look at macro and then drill down into where we know our growth areas are and see if there's anything that we're not expecting.
Well, and having not done a lot of construction or additions recently, I'm sure once you kind of get into this process and start putting the first projects out for bid, you'll start validating your assumptions here, and that, if we stay on the 8-year plan or whatever it is, that should keep, I mean, that should give us some sense that the out numbers are real or validated.
What's McKibben's timeframe to get your study back if he starts this spring?
We usually get, that information November, December. Usually we present to the full board in December. Facilities committee begins discussion with it in November and full board in December.
And Frank, that comes into play because like our 20-day numbers after the August start, that gives us a concrete benchmark to build upon. 20 days, 40 days out, our numbers solidify at that point.
I'd like to piggyback on Commissioner Aikman, and it's been a number of months since I looked at the McKibben study, and actually we hired him to do some demography work for us. Because when I look at these additional capacities, that's not, and I know you're getting ready to go back out again, but that's not my recollection. He talked about there's a bubble moving through right now that is going through, and that's definitely going to be hitting, as you said, 9th through 12th.
Next year, correct.
I don't remember a subsequent bubble, and when we look at even growth in the county and then what he projected our growth in the county is going to be over the next 5 to 10 years, it's pretty nominal. It's in some cases less than 1%, 1.2%. So where are you anticipating the bubble that's coming through your elementary schools and your middle schools that require these type of expansions and additions?
We're not anticipating another bubble. Let me be
Okay.
clear, because the bubble, we saw it all the way across.
Okay.
We're looking at pocketed growth in different communities. The new town down in that area is on fire.
Mhm.
That's what we're looking at, and then I would.
That's correct. Again, that's why we want to get a micro look at it in this study to see if we're missing anything.
Now, also notice that some of these are to get rid of mobile units. We've got mobiles in some places. And
So is that a philosophy of the Board of Education
I would
to
let Mr.
eliminate?
I would let Mr. Stewart answer.
More so than a philosophy, I think it's a reality of aging mobile units as they need to be replaced. We feel it's a much wiser and substantial investment to replace these with brick and mortar for longevity, so we could have a facility with a potential lifespan of 50 years or greater. We've got quite a few mobile units. Some of them are quite antiquated, and yes, we as a board are pushing for more brick and mortar and elimination of these mobile units as they age out by attrition, or where we have pockets at certain schools say that they've got 15, 20 of these units. We owe it to the community to give them brick and mortar, I think, to educate their children. So, yes.
How does security play into that, Kevin?
Security is an issue as far as we've addressed temporarily at some locations. Take, for instance, Wingate Elementary. I think there's 20 mobile units down there. We've installed 6-foot security fencing in areas, additional cameras, and we've had this discussion time and time again of in-place sheltering, say with a tornado warning, moving kids into the core building itself to provide some brick and mortar shelter. It is more advantageous to have them in brick and mortar to begin with. As far as active shooter scenarios, I mean, the exposure of mobile classrooms are a concern. We have trouble securing those trailer lots, if you will, because it's wide open and you get all these classrooms that are isolated from the main facility. So it's a safety and security concern, as well as an O&M long-term as far as what we're having to put into these units. And even relocating a mobile classroom from one school to another now. The codes have just changed recently that I think just to move a mobile unit from one school to the next, if we can move it, if the code allows it, and it's not forbid by the age and the design of the mobile unit, we'll spend probably upwards towards, I think about $40,000. It involves cranes, and it's no more just break it apart, pull it down the road, set it up, and throw some blocks under it. It's become a task to move them, if we can move them. So,
If it moves, it's got to meet the new code. So a 5 or 10-year-old trailer has to meet 2015, 2016 code.
So then are these organized by number of mobile units that these schools have?
No.
No,
So-
they're organized as the demand, where we see the growth and where we've already, at the capacity of the school. Remember,
Now, when we talk about the capacity of the school, are you looking at other schools around it to see what that capacity is? In other words, are all the schools full, and that's why we're adding on to these ones?
well, the school in that's feeding that area is full, or you're asking me,
Well, yeah, that's what I'm asking.
that's
I'm
why we
asking
didn't,
about-
we didn't add, for example, we didn't add anything to Kensington Elementary.
What I'm saying is, when you say the area that feeds that school, that changes what area it is, or maybe they go to different schools. I mean, are all the other schools surrounding it full?
That would depend upon the school, because the attendance lines are set and established.
Are you
The
saying-
board would have to change attendance
Would a
lines.
district rather than add on to a school, or?
I think what she's saying is, for example, Kensington is about 200 under right now, but we're looking at the growth that's coming there.
That's correct, you've
I
got the
think that's-
Millbridge growth there, so you have to plan for that growth that's there. So you don't want to move children to, wait a minute, that school's full, so now I gotta move them again.
So then this is planning that all these schools are gonna be full. We're not gonna leave some that aren't full and add on to some other ones.
Mr. Vine, again, I
You
don't know where.
understand what I mean?
Well, I think I do, but I'm to be honest with you, I don't have a crystal ball to say that Marvin Ridge Elementary is gonna fill up to
So-
804.
So you're saying if Wesley Chapel Elementary becomes over capacity, that if there's an adjacent elementary school that has capacity, that you would want them both to be at capacity before you add it on?
I just wanna know
I-
what
that's-
the
I mean, that's what I'm trying to-
situation
that's what I'm
is.
trying to
That's what I'm trying to
understand.
ask.
I think maybe another way to ask the question, though, is how, we're talking about targeted growth, targeted areas of growth, and how are we determining that those are the areas that are gonna grow? And that those are the schools that need to be added on. I mean, I've got a question about what are the specific growth areas, and more importantly, what's driving the growth in those areas? What are the assumptions that we're using to project out?
But
broader
the
sense.
growth comes from, there's a whole list from the demography report.
Right.
That you can review, but that's what we use that information to drive.
Well, I think it's building permits, because the Board of
Well-
Education looks at building permits now every month.
Just to keep things real, for 20 years, this county has been in a reactive posture with schools and growth. Growth has been allowed to just basically overwash, and we've been in the process of reacting far too late after that growth occurs. Now, what the Board of Education and Facilities envisioned doing was perhaps being a little more proactive. We've established dialogues with all the planning departments, the county, all the municipalities. We're trying, building permits are a pretty good indication of what's happening in real time, but especially when you start talking about planned use development or conditional use development, or, like the thing you guys approved out on 84, those big ticket items are the things that we can take in and try to be looking down the road 10 years where this is heating up. So, what we envisioned when we started down this road was not just simply saying, what are we gonna do if? It's like, what are we gonna do to allow for? Because I'm in the construction industry, it's heating back up. Residential is picking back up, and I think we'll see it in Union County. This is still a very desirable place to live, so, we just don't wanna get caught again.
No, proactive is great, I think that's great. I think reducing our dependence upon mobile classrooms is great as well too, because that does increase not only safety, but comfort for the students. Some of these cold mornings, those mobile classrooms, struggling to keep up with the temperature differential. I think the question is, to what comfort level, how do we get comfortable that we're spending the money in the right areas, expanding the right schools, based on these growth projections that we've got? Because, and you mentioned the PUD on 84, and it's in between a bunch of schools. So, which school are you projecting would serve that area, would be one question, because I don't see.
Those attendance lines have already drawn, so I'm not gonna say that.
And
Yeah, so.
I think we have to hang our hat on the demographer, and I think if we look back at the data, the last round of data he produced, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the margin of error was less than 2% with McKibben.
Okay.
So, you know, we've got scientific data that we can hang our hat on, and he's got a track record, so that's the foundation that we build upon. And then we start incorporating the feedback we get from the individual planning boards and that sort of thing to kind of give us a second echo, if you will, to maybe give us an idea of where these things are occurring.
And your crescent is easy. It's that Cumberson through Weddington, through Sun Valley, through Porter Ridge.
Yep, the
It's just
485
that-
Crescent's basically where we see the heat.
So, and you know, again, if you look at the plan, it's to address that, and it follows the report. And again, the plan has to be agile enough that if we get data back, that you can push the project back a year, or wait a minute, I gotta pull this forward 6 months to a year.
Or shift to another location. maybe.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right.
It's
Plan on where you're
really
going.
to be flexible enough to meet the needs as they develop.
What we're saying is right now, with the information that we have, knowing that we're gonna have out-migration in these latter years, that with these additions, we've taken into account the growth. You know, now, if it's a volatile growth situation in a pocket, then we'll have to deal with that. But we've tried to look at it across that whole crescent, and this provides that stability. But can I guarantee you're not gonna have some extreme, very volatile growth? We saw that at Newtown just this year. What was it, 170?
Over 200 families sold their homes and moved into Newtown, and we could not have predicted that at all, but people certainly had the right to do that.
Let me ask a question, please. When you talk about your capacities, you're going from in elementary, 800 to 1,000.
That's correct, yes, sir.
Is that 800 based on just brick and mortar, or is it based on, because I know Newtown, all of them are using trailers right now. What is that based on?
Newtown can have 1,000 kids in there now because the core will support 1,000, but it was built for 804 for seating. So that's why you have the mobile classroom. It can support 1,000 kids, meaning the restrooms, the hallways, and all that, media center, cafeteria. But it didn't have, the classrooms for that prototype did not have seating. The board had a policy to build their elementary schools for 804 kids.
And that's only based upon an ideal size for a school. It's not based upon any existing school today. That's just really what, the change from 800 to 1,000 at the elementary, that was just a differing look at school size, not necessarily based upon any school.
What we see is the grandfather kids moving out of Newtown next year. That will drop them down 900, below 900, somewhere 875 to 900. And the additions, what we see again, gives time for us to do the additions and for the growth to come back in to get them to where they grow up back to 1,000 kids. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to stay ahead of it, as Mr. Stewart said, because that area, the development that's going up right beside of Newtown will build out, and we have to account for that.
Dr. White?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. Well, I was gonna ask you, in reading McKibben's report, he says Union County has a uniqueness to it that people age in place. The move-up houses, they don't tend to leave the neighborhoods. Normally what people do is downsize once their kids become investors, but that doesn't seem to happen in Union. So I guess my question, kind of to Amy's question, is if you add capacity where you see building permits or buildable lots, that first wave of people moves in, those kids go through that system, then you're left with a school that it has 1,000-seat capacity in elementary school, but neighborhoods that don't have 1,000 kids in them any longer. So I guess my only question is, how do we reconcile the statistically valid point that we do see the bubbles, but the bubbles generally come with the new construction, and once that new construction's up, the families move in, kids move on and up and out. You have built permanent capacity, brick and mortar capacity that has lifespan costs 20 years plus, operating and eventual replacement again. How do you reconcile that to adding the space? Because I think I'm struggling with a little bit of a disconnect, because based on what McKibben's reported to us, that bubble or that demand is not permanent in that neighborhood. So when you see Millbridge going in, or you see any one of those, Lawson, the people that are coming in that are bringing the young kids with them, they're gonna, based on what we see now, they're gonna stay there once their kids move up and out, and there's no longer demand at that site. So you see a lot of demand right now in Newtown, But I'm questioning how long that demand on Newtown, for instance, once the area is built out, will be there.
If you mine that data a little further down, dig a little deeper, and what you will find that there are locations that occurs. If you look in the Marvin area, they tend to come in at the middle school age versus at the elementary. The Newtown area, and that crescent, that Newtown, Weddington through Sun Valley, that is a turnover type school. That out-migration there for that little corridor there, they will tend to, kids don't stay in Union County. Once they graduate, parents at that point in time settle in those houses or repopulated.
And Jeff, my neighborhood where I live, we're attached, adjacent to an elementary school. And what I see happen time and time again is when the kids move out of high school, the parents sell, and there's a brand new, fresh batch of elementary kids that are coming in, a younger family that's moving in. So I think in some of the newer stuff that's happened along the Crescent up where I live, that's what you see, is families coming in, and as people relocate, they come there for the schools, and so that's why they're there, and the empty nesters tend to move on.
I understand what you're saying, anecdotally, but I'm saying, and what the McKibben's report tells us is that's not always the case. Union County, in our discussions with me, the demographic of Union County is getting a little older, and the growth is about 1%, even within migration. So that's kind of, I'm just trying to reconcile the brick and mortar. I appreciate the safety concerns over the portable classroom. I'm just trying to reconcile the brick and mortar approach to build permanent capacity, and how much of that demand is permanent versus a temporary need in that area. Because in reading McKibben's report, if you were to look at just globally across the scale of elementary students, for instance, from 2015 to 2024, it's down from where it is today. But you're adding significant capacity in multiple elementary schools through your construction schedule. So I think, I know we're going to come back after this meeting, and I'm sure we'll have more discussion about the projects. But I'm trying to reconcile in my mind how we go out and you build permanent capacity for what looks like temporary demand.
I spoke to a family that lives out in Weddington Trace a few weeks ago, and they had three sons that have come through the school system. Their youngest son's about to graduate, the other two are already out. And they're basically empty nesters now, and they said, there's no way we're gonna keep this size house. We're looking to maybe move a little further out, get some acreage in a small, more manageable home. So I take exception with the general assumption on McKibben's comment that the empty nesters will be a major factor. And the thing that I kind of counterbalance it with, from what you guys do on a daily basis, if that's true, why are we bringing water from Norwood? Why are we planning water and sewer for the next 50 years? I mean, we're seeing the same thing in the schools that you guys are. If there's going to be a need for additional water capacity, a need for additional sewer capacity, you're planning obviously for some type of growth down the road. And I think that we've got to make sure that the schools are plugged into that same line of logic. So like I say, I'm not sure that we have any statistical data that we can accurately gauge McKibben's statement on the empty nesters. But I mean, if you're seeing growth that's coming, we're seeing it coming too.
You have to understand too, that with water, you got basins that you have to adhere to. And if you look at that growth that Norwood is going to address, it's going to be the northern and the eastern side of the county primarily. It'll give some relief to Catawba. So that's a little different animal.
Well, no, but if you look at the schools.
Well, I understand, but we've been talking the western Weddington Crescent.
Yeah.
Thing that I don't understand, is just you got a capacity at 1,000 now, the example you used a while ago, and you want to build brick and mortar to be at 1,000. I'm having trouble digesting that. I mean, I just.
Your mobile units were never designed to be a permanent fixture.
Well, I understand, but mobile units are utilized nationwide as managing these bubbles. Now, are we going to end up with no mobile units? Or are we going to end up with 10% of what we got today? Or I mean, what's the target? Is this plan take us to 0 mobile units?
You'll never get completely to 0.
I understand that, but
I don't think we purchased a mobile unit in Union County probably in the last 8 to 10 years.
I know it's not last 3 years, I would not
It may be.
previously.
So go back to what Mr. Stewart said earlier. Our mobile units are getting to the point to where you're going to have more money in trying to keep them up or you're gonna replace them. Again, they were never designed to be permanent fixtures. You have 21 or 21 mobile units at Wingate that have been there for years. So again, the decision to move away from the mobile units is a couple of reasons. One is for the safety, and two is that the growth is there. I mean, it's been stable. Those numbers would justify the additional brick and mortar classrooms.
I'm just trying to
And
understand.
that's the same thing with Newtown. It's 4,000 core. It's only, we'll take 804. So what your analysis or your would be that those mobile units would be permanent fixtures at Newtown Elementary School.
Well, I'm not thinking that, because that could be your bubble site.
Now,
And I don't know.
the bubble is at the 9th through 12th next year. What you're dealing with now is pocketed growth and growth.
And this is pocketed growth that we've seen building permits being okayed by municipalities that would feed the
And
need
looking
for
at
this.
the typical in-migration, looking at what DPI predicts us to grow, looking at what McKibben predicts our growth cycle to be as well.
Well, and the thing that, the dynamic here that so many people come to Union County for schools because the schools are just, I mean, they're just that good. And unless the schools begin to fail or falter, I don't see, from my standpoint, I don't see that changing. I talk to people all the time. You know, we're coming across here, and I could spit to the Mecklenburg line from where I am. We're coming here from, in order to be able to, go to the schools. And, mom and dad's going uptown to work, et cetera and so forth, but they're putting their head in Union County, quality of life, really good schools, and I don't see the school situation changing. That's what I'm betting on, and as long as they're really good, people are gonna keep coming.
Well, let me ask this, rather than debate about the schools themselves, when you hire McKibben, are you gonna ask him specifically about these pockets of growth and specifically
That's the month
about the
growth.
schools?
You can drill
Because
down
none
the
of
month
us
growth.
here are statisticians, and so rather than read into his report, is that what we're gonna do? He's gonna be hired specifically to say?
Well, when he looks at his report, he will update that 10-year plan every year. Have you looked at?
Yeah, I have looked
So
at
you
it.
can see that. So all he will do is he will drill down further and see if it changes his prediction over the next several years for all of our schools.
Because what I'm concerned about is, I didn't read all this in the initial report that we had from, the last time. So are we putting the cart before the horse here to not have his report in front of us to talk about all this brick and mortar?
That is based upon his report.
His past report.
And
And you
because,
were
see,
saying-
I read it more like Jeff read it about the declining and people
Well,
studying and.
But you're saying 1% countywide, and it may end up being 1% countywide because you lose some in some areas and people come to other areas. I mean, that may be the median, but when you drive around my neck of the woods, there's a subdivision coming, to a school near you every time you turn around. And I don't think
Well,
I'm exaggerating.
And we should be very proud here in Union County. We have a fabulous school system.
Exactly.
Amen. But I don't think that's the only thing driving the growth down there. I think that is a big driver of the growth, but I also think the delta in tax rate between where you said people work up in Mecklenburg County, in that Crescent area, there's a large percentage of people, families that work in Mecklenburg County and live down here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the delta in the tax rate drives a lot of that.
And it
So-
becomes a balancing act between
Oh, yeah.
how long can
Yep.
you continue to take the influx without having
Exactly.
to equal yourself to the surrounding communities that you're taking the influx from.
Exactly.
And a lot of people, New Jersey, New York, all those places where their tax bills are 3 times, they're happy to come down here and pay.
Well, they're happy, and that puts the native population at a disadvantage because they,
Yeah.
that is a dramatic change in their tax bill versus what appears to be a great one. But I think, comparison to the school systems up there and how they've been, bankrupting different locales and states.
I think there's a tipping point at which, if you have this come up too high, then you'll see, the influx go down and vice versa.
Right. So, and that's why I was asking what's driving the growth. I mean, I would like to get a personal understanding a little bit better, I think. So I need to go back and reread the report to understand what all the drivers are and what he's basing these growth projections on in the different areas.
Well,
Because it is absolutely a balancing act, and we
Yeah.
want to do the best that we can for.
And as you look at this, a long-term funding plan, which is what we're put together to do, will say, if this, then that. If what you're projecting in 2017 comes true, then you start those projects for out or 2018, and I think that goes to the flexibility again too, that, if A doesn't happen, then you don't need B. But coming up with a plan to address in case B does happen all the time is one thing. But absolutely saying that B is gonna happen is another. And I think all we have to do is we have to say, as I understand our charge is to say, then we need to come up with a plan for if B happens all the time. And if it doesn't happen, then it gets readdressed. Am I?
I think for me, I think I've shared with you the needs according to the Board of Education. These have all been approved by the Board of Education. So I think I'll let you guys get to the discussion of how you want to. So I'm not just standing up
He
here
says uncle.
while you all debate.
Mike, I want to clarify one thing before we move on. And it goes back to interface, transfer, Catawba, and Yankee PD. And perhaps the county manager can answer this question. We're approving new houses, say at Lawson. We're approving new houses on 84. We're expanding 12 Mile Creek, the sewer treatment plant out there. Do you have capacity in the Catawba Basin to service the western side of the county?
As well as eastern Union County. We're allowed to, I think it's 5 million gallons per day, we're allowed to take over the, into the other basin, into the Yaqui Basin.
Yeah, and part of the expansion of 12 Mile Creek is dealing with future growth.
We're looking at a 25-year plan.
Yeah, so that's just getting back to my point, Commissioner Helms, no disrespect.
But
I
what we're
was
also,
just alluding to
saying
fact.
as a utility, it's not all new growth. Our utility is probably growing at 2.5% a year versus our county population is probably going at 1.5% a year. And it's because we have existing subdivisions, existing residents that decide either their septic tanks are failing, their wells are failing, and they come to us and require service. So it's not just new growth that our utility system serves, but it's all the residents within Union County, whether they've been here 20 years or whether they are new development. So you have to take that into consideration too. Water and sewer and the growth in water and sewer does not equate to the same growth that we're seeing in Union County. And recently, I just gave a presentation to the Board of Realtors today on Union County, and one of the statistics they asked about where are we on building permits. We saw a pretty significant hit last year because there was a pent-up demand. We had a moratorium on water and sewer because of the recession. A lot of builders who had lots out there decided not to proceed forward. I will tell you through October, or actually July of this year, we are down 20% in building permits.
But that's
and we
unincorporated.
anticipate that
that's
trend
not
is
what
going
I
to,
saw.
that trend is going to continue. We do all of Union County except Monroe Waxhaw. We issue
Oh, so
building
you're talking about
permits.
from a sewer
Municipalities,
standpoint?
no, I'm talking about building permits, residential, single-family building permits. We do all of Union County, but Waxhaw and Monroe. We do all the permits for all of the other municipalities as well as unincorporated. And the trend we are seeing is we went through the significant growth spurt because everyone was kind of waiting for things to fall into place, for the economy to get better, for there to be ample capacity. We hit that, and we are now trending down, and we believe that trend is the more accurate trend of what we're going to see within our
Well,
community.
is that trend though because so many builders already had the building permits and they sat on them?
No.
But I think the point is, we have the capacity both east and west, so the potential for growth is there. And like I say, we're trying to look down the road to make sure we're prepared for it. I mean, I don't think we need to get caught. We're thinking about water and sewer, there's capacity in the west and the east. And from a school perspective, we're telling you, we see these needs based upon the demographer and what people in the industry are saying as far as home starts and that sort of thing through 2017, 2018. You know, it's heating back up, it's coming, and I mean.
But no one's gonna go out and expand the capacity if the need is not, if the existing proven need is not there.
This is our plan, and if in the course of the years that we see that there has been a miscalculation based on the demographer or whatever, we will certainly change. I don't think anybody wants to spend my tax money and everybody around this seat's tax money for something that is not going to come to fruition. So that's why there's got to be some agility and some flexibility to be able to move it. I don't think anything that Mike showed you is written in absolute in stone. If we see a reverse in the trending, to get back, Mr. Dixon, to get back at what you were saying, I don't want to spend money if we don't need it, if the kids aren't, if it's not, if the growth is not going to be there, certainly.
Well, I think, once McKibben starts working again too, it will either validate what we've got going forward or it won't. So as he drills down, we'll get peel another layer back. But again, that's 18 months down the road.
Well, and I mean, that brings up the question of this group, because we're chartered till June, whatever it is, 10th or whatever it is, to come up with this plan. And that's why I don't see the harm in saying, based upon the information that we had and what we could see, is we put together an if A, then B plan. If A is the growth and A happens, then B, this is how we're gonna look to fund B. Because there has to be a plan in place, and that's what we're chartered to do. If Mr. McKibben comes in and next year and says something different, then A changes and B changes. Does that make sense?
But looking at what the A part of the plan, looking at what we've already got from McKibben, that tells us that this is on target.
We've had a great deal of discussion. Thank you so much for everybody's sharing their opinions and asking great questions. I think just wondering where we are now and if we're ready to we have the plan presented to us by the school board. So if we can move on to, if there's no other discussion, let's move on to the next item on the agenda.
Which would be 6.
Our topics for the next meeting?
I think,
Have we done?
Okay, 'cause that's kind
But
of
I
what
think
we're doing.
we're starting talking
Well, I
about
think-
five.
I think we're halfway through.
We're halfway through 5.
We're working on 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've
Slid
got
right
A
on
and
in.
B.
I think we finished with 4. I think
Yeah.
we've asked a great deal of
I
questions.
think we're halfway through 5.
This is-
This is the plan, this is the plan based upon the information, research that's been done. Looks to me like,
Well,
if you're agreeable, we need to move to 5, even though we've been talking about some of that.
Yeah, we were kind of in
Yeah.
five, but yeah, go ahead.
no, I mean, I was gonna say, so if this is pay-go, what you said, then I would assume that this would not be pay-go, potentially? Or,
Well, Dr. Webb mentioned the $20 million. What he was referring to is the commission, based on legislation last year and this year, are coming up in 16, have a certain level that they have to fund for capital. So the commission last year established a tax rate of 8.2 cents. We haven't finished reval, so that whatever that number is this year. But that is sufficient, and we share those numbers back and forth. So what they have programmed right now is the commission changes the tax rate for capital. That should cover sufficiently this part of the plan.
the CCEP.
The ongoing maintenance part of it. That takes care of, and correct me if I'm wrong if I got this right, Dr. Webb. This takes care of the maintenance of the existing facilities at their current levels. And all the maintenance needs to go into that. Doesn't allow for expansion. That's the other list. But this takes care of all your facilities, all your maintenance needs, takes care of all your current existing structures as they,
And I'm gonna go back there, I was looking, thank you, John. I was looking, back at some presentations on the county's website as early as January. That was before the legislation came down. You and your projections had, 19, 20, 21 million, I think.
that was
So-
based on your request.
No, I'm talking about 2 years ago. I'd have to go back and look at the exact date, but it's been a while back, so, I wanted to make sure we clarified that.
Or what we had this year in capital for pay-go, I think was 19.5 million. What the legislation, included for fiscal year 16, I think was 19.7, I think
Yes, and some change.
And I think if you grow that out, which is in our projections document, it slowly tips over 20 million over time. And I think, you know, in conversations with Dr. Webb, and that's really been our focus, because we're limited, this second list, we can talk about if you want, but we're limited in the options on funding that. I think this is the core of the ongoing need, and ensuring that there's ongoing funding. This is where Union County got off in the past, and not having an ongoing funding source when they relied on bond savings and one-time sources to try to fund maintenance needs. So really the push on our side has been building a sustainable funding model for the schools for their ongoing needs. And I think that barring a change in kind of where we are, particularly with legislation this coming up here, that the model we built does that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're in agreement that we meet that need through this process, and the funding based on what we've done today is sufficient as it goes forward.
That's correct. Over those next 8 years would address those needs. But again, the plan will has to be agile, because you know,
Things
it's
change.
probably the first 3 years are pretty solid. You never know what's going to come at you year 5, 6, 7, 8.
Well, you know, there's one thing we have to consider. Hey, you can understand. The other capital, it's gonna be the voters decide. So I hope there's an alternate plan to address if the voters say no. I don't know, but I think Robert brought up a very valid point, that what, Mecklenburg's 84 cents?
81 cents.
81 cents.
Unincorporated Mecklenburg's
Unincorporated
81
81
cents.
cent, we're at 77 now. So, you know, that's a concern too, but I just think we also, when we come back, we also need to understand that the voters are gonna decide whether we're with this building project.
Is that,
It's
so
not, you know,
new bonds are the only way, going out and asking for new bonds? Didn't we talk something, wasn't there like a two-third?
The
Something
two-thirds
option
deals
or-
with, only deals with legal authorization to issue GO bonds. It's usually used as a way to circumvent the voters. So the commission, in our discussions, at least preliminary, there's not financial capacity to issue that new debt. And so
I'm sorry, say that again.
there's not financial capacity.
There's no
issue
way to
new
pay
debt.
the
There's
bill.
no way to pay the bill. You can borrow a mortgage, but you have to make the mortgage payment.
I figure I put it into
So you're
layman
saying,
terms.
so you're saying that you can't afford, I mean, so we go out and get, well,
You.
the collective.
We,
you.
us.
Because we can't afford.
There's not tax revenue sufficient to pay for any additional debt related to any new debt.
Unless, so in other words, so you're saying that the new bonds, we're going out to the voters for new
Right.
bonds is the only way.
And I think that the ballot language when you go out, actually suggests that if you approve the project, you approve also the tax is sufficient to cover that. And under the board's
Yeah.
policy and their capital management policy, it says if the voters approve the bond project, then they also approve the related debt service and tax payments to go with it.
Well,
But I
that's the
think
way it's always been.
in the past 4 bonds, I think, and I went and pulled that literature up to share with our committee chairs on both sides, that we have gone to the county staff to ask what the increase in tax would be if the bond passed. And that was always part of our literature that we passed out with the bond, that, and in 4 bonds, the taxpayers could increase 7.75 cents or 2.3 cents when there was or was not an increase, but that was for full disclosure to all the folks considering. Let me ask a question, and I know this is something that I asked smiling at the chairman, and I'm not talking about, it's certainly not enough money to do everything we're talking about, but with the true-up or the money that you guys got in over the 98% of your property tax ad valorem, I think if I looked at your audit correctly, it was almost $9 million, it was $8.9 million, and, you know, could our 44.5% of that, if we were to get it, could that go to some capital needs if the boards were to agree? I'm just asking.
When the Board of Education did not approve the funding formula, that's where the true-up language was. I think we gave you one true-up payment because the funding formula was still in place on our side of the house. The Board of County Commissioners has now eliminated the funding formula when we went to the bifurcated tax rate. And one of the ways we came up with the additional 10 cents that we added to the tax rate is we did, when you talked about the previous bond issues and what the associated tax
Right.
increases should have been.
Right.
Prior boards never instituted those.
Right.
We actually went back and said, what would the tax rate would have gone up if prior boards had in fact instituted
Yeah.
the associated tax rate? And that's how we came up with the 8.2 on the capital side to fund the
All right, well,
The
then I'm
$20 million
confused,
a year.
but yeah, because I want to follow this through, if I might, because in the presentation you did last, you talked about it would be, once we put it on the tax bill, it would be disingenuous,
That's
and that was
starting
the word.
on, that's
you
starting
used.
on the July 1st, 2014 moving forward. What you're referring to is the close of 2014, not 2015.
I'm talking about
Your
your
only
6/30/2014.
tax- So the only tax rate that's allocated to the schools at this point is the 14-15 tax rate. So with the close of 15, the close of this upcoming year, then whatever that savings, in fact, we smoothed the rate, so there should be fund balance in the schools fund to help smooth the rate going into 15-16. But there was no school fund, set aside.
I thought I saw in the budget, and I'll have to go back and look, because I don't remember where, that there was like, 1 point something million, and then another maybe,
1.9.
and what was the other one, like 17 or 18?
No, it's right about $20 million.
It was
Almost 20 million.
a set aside, or somebody help me with, I don't, I'm trying to think of what the language was, so that's why I'm looking at you real
Okay.
confused.
Well, and
Or,
the other,
yeah, I had a little bit more information.
I know, but
The budget's big.
I
so-
know, it's on page 50 something. I'm serious, I read your budget.
There
Either 51 or
is,
I think
56.
it's 56,
there is
because
a
I
set
talked to him about
aside,
it.
there is a set aside or a planned contribution to fund balance to smooth the rate for next year of about 1.8 million.
Okay.
So when we set the rate at 45.5, okay?
Okay.
Based on what we knew about the legislation, we said if we set the rate at 45.5 and not 44.8 or whatever that was, then over the next 2 years, we won't have to whipsaw the rate drastically up. It smoothed it out. So there is like 1.8 million that should fall to fund balance at the end of 14, which we would plan then to use in 15-16,
Okay.
so that the rate's a little more stable than going up, than having a big stair step. So it's trying to get it to as smooth as possible. So
We're
that's,
attempting not to have a tax increase 2 years in a row, especially in consideration that this is a reevaluation year as
Gotcha.
well.
and can I, because something else struck me is that, you know, you're talking about you can only budget, you said it 100 times, you can only budget or forecast at a certain percentage, but that almost yearly, your ad valorem taxes have been higher than what you originally budgeted, and you explained it because you can only forecast. What about using a percentage of that?
that's
Well,
only,
the schools will get, if we collect
if it
greater
was-
than what we budgeted, the schools have
So
a
is that
tax
rate
rate.
you're talking about?
We
Dr.
have a
Yes, that's
tax-
what I was talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
If
what
we
I thought.
have a tax rate, you have a tax rate.
Mhm.
If we collect more than we projected, that will be divided between the two based upon our tax rate.
On the total
Correct.
or on the split?
well, whatever 45.5 generates overage. I mean, we don't fill one bucket and then fill the other. We fill both buckets
Penny
equal.
here, penny here, penny here.
So-
Literally,
It's all,
divides the
it's-
bill.
ultimately, it's all the same bucket. It's just how it's being parceled out.
Well, at this rate, the way the commission's policy works, we tried to really, it's not really two buckets, or one bucket. We don't go into the schools funds to do anything on the county side. And we don't go to the county funds to do anything on the school side. So whatever that collection and overage is, which we're right at like 98.5% in our projection, so you can only hit 100% so many times. Then whatever that is will be there. There's an anomaly that occurred in 14 that was related to the motor vehicle tax. The motor vehicle tax had an 18-month collection period, 16 to 18-month collection period. So the significant bump in that single year was because of a change in tax collection and a changing period. The average normal overage that you're talking about is like $1.5 million in total. So that would be split about 60-40
So then,
between the two funds. The additional money, when we did the money for roofs and the additional capital money mid-year, we took all of the estimated fund balance that we had and sent that over for roof, you know, the $9 million in roofs. It ended up being about 19 million in total across all of it. We ended up sending that over for capital. When we got to the end of the year, the additional revenue and additional efficiency savings on the county side through debt restructurings and just being efficient and attrition and those things helped make up some of that gap. We had very limited, we about broke even.
Is that the same thing for local option sales tax then?
Now, all the local option sales tax goes to support your debt. It's about $30 million, and your debt payment's about $45 million. So all of that is allocated at this point to support the school's debt.
Yeah, but I read that it like had gone considerably down like the past 4 years from 660 something
Because we
million.
have
That's the
done
part support
significant,
payment.
we've done some
Right.
significant refinancing.
Right,
Getting rid of
yeah.
a lot of our swaps.
I think maybe, is there the school reserve, 20% reserve policy? That's what I think I was talking about.
The 20% reserve policy, what that does is it says, we're gonna keep 20% of our operating in reserve.
But it
That's
says,
based.
it's under title school.
Right, well, it's for both. It's a combination, because 20% of the general fund isn't sufficient to cover both, to backstop all of the organization. So what used to be the total general fund when it was combined, and then we split it out into schools and general fund, what we said is for policy purposes on 20%, you add those two together and it's really 20% of the total, not 20% of just the general fund, because we felt like that, and based on conversations with our rating agencies, we felt like that was too low of a reserve in our fund balance. So the 20% is there for our emergencies, for cash flow, liquidity issues, to fund encumbrances from year to year, just to keep everybody,
So that
you know, protected. It's like your
21.6
emergency
million is
fund.
there, but we're
It's
not.
not 20, it's 20%. So it's like
It said
It's like
21.6 million and
50
some change.
50 something million, or it's right around 58, 59 million.
But is that the 20% of the school tax rate that you have set
No,
aside, or the
it's
school fund?
20% of the general fund and school fund expenditures, budgeted expenditures. So the county fund is 160 million, the school fund is 100 and
So are
something
you,
more.
so you're taking, are you subtracting money, potential funding money for the schools, you're setting that aside as a part of the 20% as a whole?
No, that's fund balance. So that's previous years from, it's from previous years, nothing out of current operations. All 45.5 is going to the schools. Whether it's this year, next year, the year after, it's gonna be it's in a fund separated out for school use.
So then, and there's no part of that that's set aside for reserve that the schools
No,
can't touch?
we didn't say, school fund, you have to have a 20% on your side. What we
That's
said
what I
is,
was- that's what I was trying,
in the
that's,
total general fund, because we backstop, and I didn't want to overset the tax rate, and the commission doesn't want to set too high a tax rate just to build fund balance, we put that fund balance sits on the general fund side, so that all the funding is available in the schools fund we did it primarily as a rate smoothing technique to keep the tax rate as smooth as possible and as low as possible over time. So that funding's there. The commission's policy on fund balance is for one time or to reduce debt. So when we were above our policy level this last year, the decision was made to reduce the county's debt and fund part of the human services building with that. So we're down to about 500,000 once you account for the radio project of unappropriated spendable fund balance on the general fund side.
so.
That's above the 20% policy level.
So then, what I'm hearing here is the pay-go for the CCEP, and the only way that we can talk about funding any of this is to put out a bond.
That'd be correct. That would be your funding capacity it's gonna go back to the voters unless, well, that's, right now that's your option because you may have legal authority to do 2/3, but you don't have the funding.
No, I'm
source.
just asking, I'm
Yeah,
trying to
that's
get
correct. That
down
would
to
be
brass tacks, that's the only thing.
And Jeff, correct me, but the earliest we could
That
go
we're
out,
talking
the
about.
county could go out for a bond is what, February
February
2016. So de facto, that would move those early projects that we discussed. You have to push that whole timeline back because if they, February, then you know you've got X amount of months that's gonna have to come up out of the ground. So you have to take that into consideration.
I guess then the question would be, is is there any interest
No.
on the county side in putting a bond to the taxpayers in 2016?
Well, I think that that's probably what this group needs to kind of work through, because I
That's
don't-
right, that's
I mean,
right, here. That's
I
a
guess
nice way
my
of trying to
question
get
is,
to that.
is it 233 million? Is it 100 million? Because if, say for two projects, if you look at the ATC and the Sun Valley project, that's $120 million between them. You're looking at 136 million without those two projects. And you have the opportunity every other year. And for those folks watching at home, there's a presentation we did on bond elections a couple of weeks ago that kind of outlines all this different stuff, and kind of how it all works.
Yeah.
But you have the opportunity again in 2018 to have another bond election in 2020. It's every other year in the even number of years. So the question I think for this group, the challenge is try to figure out which ones we want to recommend to the Board of County Commissioners and the Board of Education that need to go on that bond election, and which one, if it's the 2018 or if it's the 2016. And I think that's, because you have a couple of big chunks, and then you have the remainder are a number of smaller projects.
And when the board we had a budget work session on Monday, where it was primarily dealing with our volunteer fire departments, but we did have a small discussion on bond election. And that's exactly what our board members said. I mean, they in essence said, there will be no county projects on the 2016 ballot. They wiped them all out and said, think about them some point in the future, and some of them they said just take them off the list. As it related to SBCC, we talked a lot about, let's talk about all the pieces, parts, and who's doing different types of education, and let's look at how we bring that together so that we have kind of a one-stop shop, that one entity is providing workforce training. As it related to the school projects, they said, we have a group that is supposed to be working through this issue. We need to await what their recommendations are before we make any determination as to, is there a referendum in 2016 or not?
Are you talking about this work?
This group.
Okay, I started saying, is there another?
No,
I'm sorry,
no. This group.
just making sure I knew.
It's the other one you didn't get an invitation to.
So, just to make sure that I'm clear, so what you're suggesting is that the only option is a bond, that you're not going to consider the 2/3, you're not going to consider cops, you're not going to consider even looking at your current fund balances, if it's there. So those are not open for discussion within this group, is that, I mean,
Well,
that was what we were supposed to
that was one
discuss.
question, that was one question that I had, Mike, I was waiting for a chance to jump in, that maybe, and Jeff, you probably answer these for me, but I think statutory requirement for your contingencies, like 8%, you guys pushed it to 16, and now I'm hearing it's 20%.
There's not the LGC sets that rule, it's a two-step rule. The recommended is a minimum of 8%. However, the other test is relative to your median in your peer group, and that varies from year to year, but 20% is about right. Where we picked 20% is based on our conversations with our bond rating agencies, which at the end of the day, if we want to issue debt and our bond rating's in the tank, none of this, it's really all a moot point because it's not affordable to begin with. So in order to maintain our bond rating, the rating agencies are really concerned about liquidity and our ability to, if there's advance, if you have events and all those different things, to be able to continue to make our bond payment. And what they've told us is that we don't have enough, and even at 20%, there is still some concern over that.
All right, I was reading that little thing of y'all's end there, your end, and it was highlighting what a wonderful place you guys were in with regard, and the way I read it with the bond, with
Our
bond
bond ratings
rating.
We are, but to hold it there, we can't go in, you can't go out and spend and have your savings account and not expect the banker, and Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, if you went out and blew half your savings account and you went out to try to borrow money, that's gonna be a concern. And I think the rating agencies, when they look at your fund balance, what they're looking at is, what are you using your fund balance on? And what are you doing with it? And in our case, we have reached the level where we now have a sufficient fund balance to protect our bond rating. And if we did below that, and we had this long conversation with some of our rating agencies, even this last spring, last year at this time, was if there's insufficient funding there, then our ratings will take, first we'll get put on a negative outlook, and then we risk a downgrade. And that's And I think at the end of the day, that's not a wise move for the county.
Jeff,
Let me
ask-
just say one thing. I think we should keep this for our next meeting because I think Jeff will probably like a prepared presentation or something, because we're getting into
I'd like to
some
continue
nitty-gritty.
discussion just a little, so he knows what we're gonna be looking for.
I think
I've
that's
still got a
fine. We're
couple
kind of
questions.
getting into number 6, so we can stay on our agenda.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, right now, interest rates are favorable. The construction market is still somewhat soft as far as our ability to leverage good deals on construction. And given that, if 2/3 aren't an option, my first question would be, what about design, lease, build? What about COPS I know that's probably that's gonna be the same situation, but what about a design, build, lease scenario? And I had a question about, believe it or not, I've read your audit from last year. You can tell I have a lot of exciting things to do. But I know you referred to, I think it was committed projects, committed fund balance.
Mhm.
And is that money locked in? I mean, say if we needed to go ahead and move with some of the first year projects, say at Newtown or Western Union or something like that, is there any way you can juggle the funds in-house, say with some of those committed fund balances to
Work on
expedite that and then
Well,
backfill it as we move forward?
Our committed projects, the county doesn't have a real robust capital program. Our committed projects are either preparing to go to bid or are already under contract. So once they hit contract, that funding is completely locked up. And once they're in design phase, you know, you don't want to completely pillage out and freeze the county's capital program in favor of other projects. So those projects are underway in various stages. So that money, we have very little uncommitted or our money in our capital program that's not already in projects that are underway in some form or fashion.
Is committed a new word for assigned? Because last time
There's about 5 or 6 different levels.
okay.
So, in theory, all the money that's put in the capital program, in our capital fund, is assigned to a project. So, we don't have excess money in our capital program of any substance. There's about $1 million there, that's through project funds. And Mike works real hard to reallocate that money across projects, and we are too. We just wait till our budget process to do it. Other than that, every dollar that's in our capital projects fund is assigned to a project, most of which, I'm trying to think if there's any significant, the only ones that may not be completely under contract are parts of the maintenance projects. But all the major significant construction projects are either in a significant design, getting completed, getting ready to go to bid for construction, or are actually into the construction phase. So
So assigned and committed are two different things. 'Cause up until, I never heard the word committed until today, so that's what I'm trying to understand.
What it amounts to, and probably the best way to explain it is, there's a certain part of your fund balance from year to year that the commission, once they appropriate it to a project, it has different levels. So if it's assigned, there's a policy constraint on it, and then there's committed and restricted is the highest level because that's outside your organization. Committed has a different connotation to it depending upon who does it, and then all the way down. And it's a GASB 54, which is the new rule, and that's only been in place, Dan, since a few years ago. And GASB 54 came into place, and it's no different. We account for ours the same way. But what it amounts to is that when you get to the bottom, you filter it through all the commitments and all the appropriations and commitments the commission has made, there comes to a bottom of appropriable fund balance. And the appropriable fund balance
Say
is
that
really
word again?
appropriable, what we call appropriate.
They can
It's able to
appropriate
be
it.
appropriated
Thank you.
or spendable
I
without
thought you just had
impacting
a
anything before.
cocktail or two.
So when you get down to the bottom of that funnel, that amounts about $500,000.
Okay, I just never had heard the word committed, so that's what I was trying
That's
to
fine.
figure out. But
Well, yeah, I'm gonna ask you one more question, and I promise I'll be quiet after that, at least for a little while. And it's somewhat loaded, but, you know, in reading the audit from last year, I know you guys had projected pulling about 20 million out, almost 21 million out of fund balance. And actually, you did not have to call that 21 out. I think at the end of the year, I actually realized like $500,470.
Barely broke even.
Yep, but you didn't have to pull that 20 million out. The fund actually appreciated by 478,000. So that tells me that you covered the projects you needed to, the 20 you thought you were gonna spend, and you still came up almost a $500,000 to the good. Now here's the loaded part. What do you anticipate at the end of this year? Do you have any read? And what I'm getting at is like some of the things that we, as a group, can recommend that we seize upon and move with any in-hand funding that wouldn't require a bond or whatever. Do you foresee that being a possibility?
One elephant that I can see in the room is called revaluation. And that's already been documented, what, 5% overall for the county?
Somewhere.
Yeah, it's gonna be down,
Meaning you
5
anticipate your
pennies.
revenue falling.
falling
Will
to
you
the
adjust
point where if you had to go revenue neutral, you may have to raise taxes up to 5 cents.
Raise the tax
Raise,
rate.
raise the
Raise the
rate,
tax rate.
but the tax bill will stay the same.
Thank you.
And-
Right.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
point
That's
being
important.
is that.
You're being recorded, don't say
No,
that.
that's fine. No, the point is we're trying to manage our resources with this new ad valorem tax that it's not gonna be a windfall this year like you talked about last year with the 6 million. It's just the opposite. So, and I've asked Jeff, I've asked him some questions. He says, well, I won't know for a couple of weeks.
Well, I was gonna
They
say,
haven't finished.
the 5% is a projection, that's how I read it, right?
We're actually running the numbers right now. We're making a presentation to our board on April 6th. We will tell them how many pennies will revenue neutral equal, that if they want to generate the same amount of money that they generated this year, how many pennies need to be added to the tax rate to do so?
Well, and
That's a concern for me, because, raising taxes, I'm not for it, if we can substantiate it,
well,
prove it, but, that 45 cents is gonna hit you as well.
oh, I know.
And
It hits all of
so,
us.
we all need to look at that elephant and figure out how we're gonna take it and bite it at a time.
Well, and that's, Richard, that's what I was kind of getting at. I'm trying to educate myself. I mean, being in an industry that came through a heck of a downturn for 5 years, we're used to shaking the bush, every bush, and see if we can get anything to fall out.
I agree.
And so if there's anything we can do that's innovative and outside the box as far as how to resolve some of these problems, I think we just need to leave no stone unturned.
And I guess I want to point something out, because if this group is tasked with coming up with long-term funding, it sounds like, and I don't mean to be rude or flippant, but it sounds like you've already decided what the long-term funding is by saying we.
And inside, I think you have limitations on what your ability to fund.
Well, but that's, and I guess that's what I'm saying, is that I assumed that we were gonna throw it all on the table and decide what was best for the county as a whole. And what I'm hearing is you can have your pay-go and your bonds, or that's the only way, that's the only thing that we're limited to.
Well, the county doesn't have $227 million.
No, I'm
to
not
fund.
saying 227
But I
million,
mean, that's where you're
but-
kind of where you're at.
No, it's not. Where I'm at is, I thought we were gonna look at the whole pie as a group and decide what's best for the county.
Well, you can, but what I'm telling you is the pie is not of any substance at this point. The pie, in answer to your question, and which it kind of gets to Amelie's point, in looking at it in personnel, where we would normally see a 10% attrition, if we don't have folks moving on, we're down to 5% attrition, meaning 5% vacancies across our county. So where some of that savings you saw last year was a confluence of a number of issues. The changes in the revenue collection, it was made up of about $9.5 million of revenue, the largest chunk of which was a change in motor vehicle taxes. And then we saved about $8 or $9 million on the expenditure side, which was a factor of redoing part of our debt, some attrition, public assistance payments changing, different things that just across the county that we saved on. I don't expect that in looking at our monthly report, we're not trending upward like that this year. We expect probably about break even. We'll know more in a couple of months as we get kind of to the third quarter, but we've already collected probably 97, 98% of our tax for ad valorem, and talking with our collections folks, we're gonna hit right at what our projection was. And on the motor vehicle tax, where we historically have had over collection, because the motor vehicle tax changed and you can't register your car without paying your motor vehicle tax, we're collecting about all we can get out of that and projecting about all we can get out of it. So from that perspective, I don't see a significant windfall coming, and we'll know more in a couple of months as we get kind of closer to the end of the year.
But you were asking, you were asking about maybe reallocation of projects, is that what you were aiming at?
No. I guess what I'm saying is, if we were gonna look at a long-term funding plan, it probably would have saved us all a bunch of hours and time to just say, well, the pay goes for this and we gotta go out for bonds for the, I mean, it seems like you're giving us a very simple answer, but.
Well, but you're limited, because there's not,
I'm not saying we're
There's
not
not-
limited, but I'm just wondering why we're not exploring
Well,
other things.
and if we didn't do a good job at the last meeting, I apologize, but the last meeting, I think Jeff spent 2.5, 3 hours
Well,
in
yeah, and
talking
you talked about
about
different sources, but now what I'm
all
hearing.
different sources, what were available, and did identify those that, you know, COPS were used in the past, which is where the asset is what secures
Yeah.
the debt. I will tell you, coming from a very conservative government background, we don't use swaps, we don't use COPS because of the fact that, they're not as secure as a general obligation debt.
It's a
That is
risk.
probably the most secure kind of debt that you can obtain.
Which is a bond.
Right.
Correct, okay.
Let's Miss Ansley, she's had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, I don't want to end up repeating something I've already heard, but I want to make sure I'm clear. As you said, we listened to a 3-hour presentation last month or in January regarding funding options. And as I understood it, we listened to funding options, so when Dr. Webb, Board of Education got together and rushed this document through, we could lay those funding options on this document here. But what I'm hearing tonight, that's already been done.
No,
That the funding option available,
no.
as she had said, the funding option available is a bond. So everything else we listened to was, as you just said, was not an option from the beginning, coming from conservative government background, correct?
The intention of the next meeting, which is I think kind of where we are on topics, is for us to come back together. I assume everyone has read most of the CCEP as well as the other documents that have been handed out, is to come together, talk about priorities, and talk about what are the funding options.
And when you say priorities other than the ones already outlined here, or what priorities?
This is what is being submitted to us by the Board of Education.
And it is prioritized, correct?
It is prioritized by the Board of Education.
Who has the authority to change that?
I think this committee does. I think our job at this committee.
Oh, no, but
that's
we
not
don't.
right.
No,
That's not
I
right.
think what we're supposed
I would
to do,
disagree.
That's not, well, that's not
Now, let's
for
let-
legislative
let's
to do.
everybody,
Let's let the chair talk.
yeah. If we're not gonna talk about priorities and what our options are, then what are we talking
This
about?
is the priority. This is what we've been
This is the
waiting on to
priority.
get moving, to get moving.
And so then we need to talk about what our funding options are, and they are what they are.
Okay,
I
And so
think
that's
it's-
what I think we need to talk about in detail next time, because we can
Is-
get a
I'm sorry,
detailed report.
priorities?
The statutory charge was for the Board of Education is statutorily charged with identifying their needs and presenting to the county via this working group. We have satisfied our statutory responsibility to show you the needs, show you the priorities. We've shepherded through it and tried to dial it in. Now, I think we basically are handing the ball off to the county commissioners, but this working group is a part, is the interim, as it moves from need to funding, where this group comes up with how we're gonna do
We've
it.
got to go back and look at the
And-
legislation.
And I tend to agree with
This
a
is
couple of
all
folks that
it?
have made the point that, you know, even cops, I know there are a couple of counties that are fund 911 center by cops or whatever, but I think that we need to make sure we've got all our options on the table. And because we have a unique situation as far as the bond situation, not being able to leverage 2/3, we've got to look at all the funding mechanisms. But no, this group is not charged by statute to prioritize this list.
I don't mean priorities as in number them, I mean, if we're gonna do funding purposes, is this it? Are there any that we can put off until 2 years from now? You think we can't talk about that?
I think that would depend on, Amy, the funding that's available. That's what's gonna affect.
I would like to have
the
an oral
projects that
reading
we
of the
do.
statute, if we could, to refocus. I'm an English teacher. Let's refocus. Would you like to read it? I mean,
By all means, you can read it.
I'm going to the restroom.
Frank's heard the statute.
Do we need to take a bathroom break?
That might be
Now,
good.
why don't we take a bathroom break for about 10 minutes?
It's just 25 after, I think we're still in good shape. and so it was about 10:30 or
I was
11
gonna say,
o'clock.
it's not nearly as much.
Not as late, but it's not as late as I feel.